Good morning, everyone. My name is Brit Morin. As John said, I am an investor, a serial entrepreneur, and a women's health optimist. And we're saving the best for last at Doc this year by having these three amazing female founders on stage with us. We are tackling a paradox. Obviously, women are half of the population, but we are still considered a niche market when it comes to venture capital, among other things. And today you're going to hear from each one of these women about what they've been up to, what they've been building. And this isn't really about a struggle fest, let me say. This is about the optimism, actually, that these three women have for what is changing and what could change to make women's health companies and startups more active and palatable in the space. So with that, I'm going to kick it off with Roma Van der Walt. She's the founder and CEO of Vitelle. She is turning women's physiology into actionable intelligence, bridging high-performance data and everyday health. Roma?
Hello, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. I'm also German, so that may not always come across as intended. We had an exceptional women's health panel yesterday and then listened to Susan, obviously, and I think two things really stood out to me, which was that the doctor-patient relationship could shift to where the patient and technology can take care of 90% of their health, and then the patient meeting the provider takes up the 10% to really get that human interaction. And then the second thing that stood out in the women's health panel yesterday was the fact that we have no data. And that's my jam, and I love data, so let's talk about data. So female bodies, as you may all know, have to adapt every single day. They have to adapt to hormones, to stress, like being up on stage, to training load, and to life. But despite the fact that that's our adaptation and the core of our resilience, that is vastly ignored by the data systems that we're currently working with. So Brit has already introduced me. I'm Roma Van der Walt. I'm an exercise physiologist. I'm a former professional athlete, and I am also the founder and CEO of Vitelle, where our goal is really to create the data's infrastructure to finally decode how female bodies adapt. So in exercise physiology, there's a term called supercompensation that describes the period after a stressor when the body not only recovers, but it actually rebounds to a higher level of function. And that's really important, so we're not just playing ping pong, you're okay, you're not okay. But then, as you may have guessed, in women, it's not that straightforward. And predominantly because of two hormones called estrogen and progesterone. So when our estrogen is high, muscle glycogen storage is improved, mitochondrial efficiency is improved in the cells, and even things like muscle protein synthesis, so for body composition. When estrogen and progesterone are low, on the other hand, our parasympathetic nervous system doesn't recover as well. We're more reliant on carbohydrates, and we're generally less resilient to stress. But what happens, and what you can see here, is that if we model a standard 72-hour recovery window, which is modeled on male data, we could significantly over or undershoot the optimal adaptation window for women. And that's just one missed opportunity of what we're not doing to create optimal well-being for female bodies. Because a female body, as we all know, well, everybody female in the room knows, has to recalibrate itself every single month. And that includes our metabolism, our temperature. It includes things like our brain chemistry. And there's a whole data layer that we're not currently looking at yet. But what we measure, we can manage. Or as sports scientists like to say, test, don't guess. So if we start collecting data and we want to create equitable health intelligence, we really have to make sure it's multidimensional data. It has to take into consideration hormones, physiology, and most importantly, context, so that these models that we're working on, like Claudia's and Claude and Claudia, can learn how to adapt to, well, can learn from female adaptation instead of flattening it. And the most public example that we have are athletes. So I was a professional athlete. I know how hard adaptation is. And they are under pressure, adapting every single day. But the one thing that they have that we're trying to, I think, establish in this room, they have multimodal teams. So their support is physiological, it is clinical, and it is practical. And when the team behind the team dials in their health, their recovery, and their biology, that's when their injury risk goes down, their readiness stabilizes, and their performance peaks. And so when we observe these athletes on the field, we should really think about how we can be creative in designing health interventions for everybody else off the field. So when we model, when we look at the market, and I won't harp on it, but there's an almost $800 billion preventive care market, and 60 to 70% of that is driven by women. But again, as we all know, despite that fact, interventions for women are reactive, they are siloed, and they're still one size fits all. So we can apply the logic from sports science and the way they apply it to their female athletes to try and think about how we can create better interventions for women in general. So when we model adaptation, we create predictable health. The female body is nuanced, we know that, it's annoying, it's part of why we weren't part of clinical trials for so long, but it's actually also a blueprint. It's a blueprint for cyclical stress exposure, for variable recovery, and for distributed load management. So in my opinion, the next health revolution is and has to be female. Because if we get it right and we cross between siloed metrics, that's how we optimize health span and lifespan for females. And then when we scale that, we transform health systems because these women are at the center of our communities and caring for everybody else. So after I said all this, and it's obviously very female-centric, what I'm not trying to say, if you take anything away, that the future of health is gendered. I really think that the future of health is adaptive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we've got Bailey Renger, the founder and CEO of BeSound, which is a new technology using photoacoustic and ultrasound technology to give women with dense breast tissue the imaging clarity they deserve. It's very cool. Bailey, over to you.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Bailey, and to add a bit more context to that introduction, thank you. I'm a physicist by training, so my background's actually in quantum computing. I worked at NASA and Harvard and started my PhD in physics at Brown, and I'm currently on leave to build this company. So after my own cancer scare, I realized that this is a huge problem, and I felt a sense of urgency, and here I am. So breast cancer screening today is failing women really in two main ways. So the technology, but then also the systems and the access to that technology. So you've all probably heard of dense breast tissue. Maybe most of you women in the room have dense breast tissue. And the reality is, if you have dense breasts, your breast cancer can be missed on a mammogram alone. And so, and in fact, 40% of breast cancers are missed by mammography alone. And so we're serving women with dense breast tissue, but then also women under 40, which, newsflash, if you're under 40, you can get breast cancer, and the rates are actually skyrocketing in women under 40, which is very concerning, but there's no way to get screening reimbursed. So we're also serving that group of women. And then the emotional stress that comes with waiting weeks to get a diagnosis, we aim to solve that through technology, the AI that we're building, which we're really excited about. So I love this image because it's a really great visual on what does dense breast tissue look like. So from left to right, you can see these are 4 different mammograms of women with increasing breast density. You can see that dense breast tissue shows up as the color white, so does breast cancer. And so this is a physics problem, right? So it's just difficult. There's a masking effect. So it's difficult for radiologists to actually discern whether or not breast cancer is present. And another fact about having dense breast tissue is you're actually at an increased risk of breast cancer. So we're doubly failing these women. You're more likely to have breast cancer, and you're more likely to have it missed. And you can only determine breast density through medical imaging. Like, a lot of women are like, you can't tell by looking at breasts, you can't tell by the size of your breasts, it's post-mammogram or MRI. And so there's really a tailwind right now, which is the FDA updating its guidelines around notification of breast density. And so this happened last fall. And so now women are required to be notified of their breast density status and that mammograms can miss their breast cancer. So what's next, right? 40 million women in the US alone have dense breasts. This is just 40 plus. There's a lot of women under 40 who have dense breasts. And a lot of them don't really know what to do next. It's not reimbursed in most states. And so we have a solution that we're really excited about. So just to double click on the current breast imaging technologies, what exists today, and the sensitivity and specificity and where we're seeing problems. So screening mammography, I mentioned, has a low sensitivity in women with dense breast tissue, and also is not something that's reimbursed for younger women. It's not recommended for younger women because there's radiation involved, and so exposure to that is also concerning. Screening breast ultrasound is a great adjunct tool for women with dense breast tissue. However, it's not reimbursed in most states, as I mentioned. And you see, actually, even though it can detect more breast cancers when paired with mammography, it decreases specificity. So you might be flagged for having a lesion that is actually just a cyst or fibroadenoma. And there's a staggering statistic around here, which is that 80% of breast biopsies are benign. So this is not scalable, right? We can't have all these 40 million women now getting a breast ultrasound, and then a lot of them have to get a breast biopsy. It would flood the system. And so we're in need of both a technology that can improve the sensitivity of breast cancer screening and the specificity. And so we also have a solution here, which is ultrasound-based. It's photoacoustic imaging. And this has been demonstrated to reduce false positives. And the way that it works is it's an ultrasound transducer, and there's near-infrared laser. It's a dual wavelength probe. And because oxygenated hemoglobin and deoxygenated hemoglobin have unique absorption coefficients, the result is actually this color map overlay. So in this color map overlay gives the radiologist information on oxygenation and vascularity, so functional information. So you can think of like a contrast-enhanced MRI, except it's a contrast-enhanced ultrasound. No gadolinium is required, no injection, so it's contrast using light. So functional MRI, in a way, this is kind of an analog. And so in the top row, you can see this is a benign lesion. The bottom is malignant, and so pink and red indicate regions of hypoxia or that are deoxygenated. And so the radiologist can then make the decision to downgrade or upgrade the lesion based on that data. So yeah, this is the technology that we are hoping to use diagnostically to help reduce false positive breast biopsies, while at the same time, both increasing and then maintaining sensitivity, so less cancers are missed. This is just an overview of, there's a lot of different technologies in this space, and we've believed that we have found the solution for both the best sensitivity and specificity. Contrast-enhanced MRI is great. However, not very many women can afford that technology, or they'll opt out of it because it requires an injection or intravenous contrast, and or they're claustrophobic. So this technology is not painful, no injection is required, and we believe it's a scalable solution for women with dense breast tissue, women at intermediate risk, and then younger women. And as I also mentioned at the beginning, we're building AI to help radiologists read these images more quickly, acting as a decision support tool so we can drive down the cost of this technology to make it more accessible to more women. So with that, I'll hand it back to Brit. Thank you.
Thanks, Bailey. Very cool. All right, last up, we've got Daisy Robinton, co-founder of Oviva Therapeutics, which actually sold a couple months ago. And Oviva is redefining how we treat and prevent ovarian aging, bridging reproductive biology and longevity science.
Hello, everybody. Do I have to use this? Can I stand here? That's better. I'm Daisy. It's such a pleasure to meet you all, and thank you for staying for the very last session. I know there's been a lot of information and content, and you're all baking and simmering in it, and I'm actually quite excited that we get to be last, so we can have that last word and be the last thing that you're really thinking about as you leave and are inspired and percolating on all these incredible ideas and conversations. And of course, thank you, Jordan and Kevin and John, for having us, and to the working group that enabled our panel to be here talking about what we're talking about. I'd love to tell you a little bit about Oviva and what I built and why, but I'm more excited to talk about the opportunities, AKA structural barriers, that companies like ours face and have faced and continue to face, and what the roadmap is to seeing more success and innovation reach the hands of patients and people in this space. I'm a molecular biologist by training. I did a PhD and a postdoc, really looking at the intersection of early developmental biology and aging and pathology. And when I was 31 years old, I went to a reproductive endocrinologist just to kind of figure out what my fertility journey might look like, and was horrified to learn that despite having a PhD in human biology and translational medicine, I was shockingly ignorant about my own body and physiology. And that sent me down a rabbit hole to better understand ovarian physiology and the science of female physiology. And I think Brittany will probably be pleased to learn that the thing that horrified me most was that when I went through menopause, my sex life would tank. So I was like, this cannot stand, I must do something. Literally, that was like one of the main drivers. I was like, I can't handle that for 40% of my life. So I went on this deep dive just to better understand what is it about the ovaries that support overall health and well-being. What can we do so that the second half of our lives can be as rich and vibrant and sexy as the first, well, maybe not the first half, but sexually active part, whatever. That got weird. So I ended up starting a company called Oviva Therapeutics in partnership with my co-founders, David Pepin and Pat Donahue from MGH and Harvard, who are two incredible, fabulous minds that built the foundation of the biology around the protein called AMH, which we heard a little bit about yesterday, currently used as a clinical biomarker to approximate ovarian reserve. Now, what's cool about AMH is it's actually a regulator of how quickly our eggs are lost throughout the course of our lifespan. So if you're a cycling woman before menopause, you're losing about 1,000 eggs per cycle. That's to ovulate one. So there's this enormous waste. We don't really understand why we want or need 1,000 eggs to be lost with every cycle. And AMH really controls if we have a high number or a low number of eggs that are being released every month to mature and potentially be the one that ovulates. So our thesis at Oviva was really, could we use this as a therapeutic strategy to reduce that number of eggs that were lost every month as a means to extend the runway of time that our ovaries are able to function before they then fail and go into menopause. So as Britt mentioned, we sold our company earlier this year to Granada Bio, so they've sort of carried the mantle. But I'll just say briefly, as a company that really built a framework around a single asset therapeutic strategy with a much broader potential and long-term goal for how we're going to improve health span in women, we really struggled in the awful market that has preceded, the last couple of years to find investors that were willing to take that risk and carry forward the incredible science we had to see the fruition that is possible. And in many ways, that's actually what led us to sell the company, is because it's able to be, the risk is able to be borne by a different structure, somebody that has a diversified portfolio. It just wasn't going to work as a single asset play. And there's a lot of companies in the women's health space that suffer from this because they have this really deep focus. They're trying to solve the problem, and you have to do that with really high specificity because the complexity is already so enormous that when you start broadening too much, you really lose your ability to be effective. And so we start getting into some of the reasons that we see failures in this place. There's 5 that I really want to talk about. The first is funding, which I won't belabor because everybody talks about it and it's a little bit boring. But I'll just say briefly that we are seeing improvements in funding for women's health, but we're still seeing a failure at the growth stage. So a lot more capital is going in for these early stages, seed and pre-seed, even Series A, and we're not seeing that convert at Series B, in large part because of the broader the broader structural needs that are enabling scaling. So the second is diagnosis, and this goes to Roma's points around data. We don't have the data, and paired with that, we don't actually have the language. So we don't really understand how to talk about many of the conditions in women's health, much less at the biological level, what's really happening and how to diagnose and treat those. And without diagnosis, we can't have ICD codes. So this is another enormous barrier for anybody, especially in the therapeutic space. If there's not an ICD code, there's not a mechanism for reimbursement. So who's paying for that? That's why we often go direct to consumer and why there's a lot more direct to consumer plays coming out. But again, this gets to the scale program. If we're gonna solve for the female population in the country and on the earth, we really need to solve this problem. Next is the adoption and reimbursement. We talked a lot, I think, yesterday about adoption and clinical training for OBGYNs and other physicians and how to get them up to speed on managing and understanding female physiology, but we also have a huge reticence to adoption for technologies and therapeutics in women's health, in large part because the clinical practices that focus in women's health tend to be the most financially stressed and the least incentivized to adopt something new, certainly if there's not strong reimbursement. So these are some of the pillars of structural barriers that I think are really flagged and important for companies in our space and for people that are interested in supporting companies in these space to really have an eye on and a plan for in order for there to be a path to success. Now, what I'm really excited about with all of these is that you cannot be successful as a company in women's health without having an eye on these. And at the same time, these problems aren't necessarily unique to women's health. They're problems that exist, at least in the United States, broadly. And as we all know, our healthcare system delivers some of the poorest value among our peer groups globally. We're spending $5 trillion a year for national health expenditures. And that's to get 4 years lower life expectancy than our peer countries. And 20% of our GDP for having increased maternal mortality rates, infant mortality, high burdens of chronic disease, to name just a few. And so we all know that there's reform that's needed, and I think what's exciting to me is that women's health companies are really poised to be the leaders of this charge because we already have to be thinking about that. If you don't have a plan in that, you're not gonna be successful. And I think, generally speaking, we need reform, and so we need that radical transformation to be brought forward by some of these companies that are thinking about how to innovate broadly as well as innovate technologically in the lanes that we're in. So just a few ideas to see this. I ran out of time, I'm sorry. I'll take 30 more seconds. Just a few ideas to see this discussion and get everybody here thinking. One of the things that we need to be doing is generating the regulatory and adoption pathways. So thinking from the regulatory standpoint, but also the clinician training. Reform the reimbursement, so generating pilot ICD codes so that we can actually incentivize the adoption of and pay for these new innovations. Expanding the FDA flexibility for technology in the women's health space, and I know that's something that there's at least been conversation around and interest in for the last couple of years, at least in some of the interactions I've had with the FDA and in rooms that I've been in with folks from the FDA. And just an acknowledgement that this solution is very complex and multifaceted. It requires everybody in this room and all of the health equity stakeholders to have a hand in. That's gonna be the innovators, that's gonna be the government, that's gonna be the patients and the providers. And so I do think an enormous part of the ask is really bringing this awareness forward, because certainly when I started in this field many years ago, none of this was visible to me. I just thought, oh, there's unmet need and really amazing, strong science. Of course this can work. How naive, right? That's just not true. This is not driven by unmet need. Our field is not driven by unmet need. It's driven by the market and the structures. So that's what we need to change, and I think it's an invitation for our companies to lead that charge. Thank you.
So we'll do a few minutes here discussing, but we do want to preserve at least 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A, so start percolating those questions. But Daisy, I actually want to go back to you real fast. So you sold your company. If you were going to start all over again, and knowing what you know now, that like you said, Granada Bio is actually this nice home for it because you can have more resources to scale it the way it should be. Is there a construct that you would start over again with in that vein, like strategic partnerships or strategic financing to make that longevity of your company longer?
Yeah, I absolutely think that a way I would do it differently today is just having it be a lot bigger and a lot bolder. I was taking a scalpel to like an iceberg, and just you need like a scalpel that is also a sledgehammer. So I think building coalitions early and partnerships early, working for a lot more capital, and getting out of the constraints of the VC life cycle, because I also think the fact that we need a lot of data, there's a lot of time and work and careful, thoughtful consideration that's going to go into creating successful, rigorous, science-driven products. But I just think the 3 to 5 year fund cycle is not particularly supportive of. So like you said, I think a big part of it is really just having this bigger, broader vision that very early on engages multiple stakeholders that have the same incentives that you do and desire to see the change so that you can go from start to finish with that ecosystem. You're building it as you go. And that's, I think, one of the only ways, certainly for therapeutics. I mean, it's different, there's different models here, but certainly for therapeutics that you need to be thinking about and implementing from day one.
Mm-hmm. And Bailey, I know you are more direct to consumer as a business model decision. Why? And I assume it's due to everything Daisy just talked about, but were you sort of forced into that, or was that a proactive decision?
Yeah, we do have insurance reimbursement on the horizon. That's important to us and in building a product that's accessible. But initially, we are cash pay because most states don't reimburse screening breast ultrasound yet. It's also on the horizon, so that's exciting, and we're hoping to build out the infrastructure such that we can just turn on that capability once different states start mandating it. So January 2026, New York is next. So that's really exciting, and that's actually where we're headed in January as well. But I think what's also interesting, so this technology, the photoacoustic imaging component, the diagnostic to downgrade and upgrade lesions, that can oftentimes replace breast biopsies, which is a revenue stream for hospitals and providers. So that's been interesting. But we do know that we are aligned with, obviously, the patient, and then this is something that payers are excited about to reduce unnecessary breast biopsies. But yeah, cash pay initially, but a low cash pay price, like a few $100s, not a few $1,000s, and insurance reimbursement definitely is on the horizon. So yeah.
Does that impact your view of how many people you can address in the market? I mean, it's like $300, right, for one of the screenings. If you go to certain states, like, can you get to these people the same way, or do you ultimately need to get these providers and these health systems on board?
I think $300 is pretty reasonable price, and for more context, I'm also from Iowa, so I know what it takes to serve like Middle America and that type of patient. And really, this is just like short-term, next 12 to 24 months. So, but yeah, I mean, you see like Prenuvo scans, Ezra scans, like those are much more expensive. And if you read the fine print, they don't screen for breast cancer, the most common cancer in women. So I think this is something that women are frustrated with. They're now getting this letter from their doctor that says they have dense breast tissue. Their mammogram alone is not enough. And so the need is there. And hopefully this cash pay is just like a crutch to building a reimbursable model that can serve more women. But
if you could snap your fingers, you would have
exactly.
be reimbursed, not
exactly.
direct to consumer.
Yeah.
And Roma, I know you're building more of a B2B model with what you're doing. How much is AI and everything that we've talked about during this conference influencing all of the decisions you're making right now about where the future is headed?
Yeah, I think machine learning and AI allows us to really create that multimodality. It's, especially in women's health, it's very fragmented, and we've, to Daisy's point, we have companies that have to go hyper-focused on one stage or on one condition. And AI and machine learning really allow us to bridge the gaps and put that all together. The reason why we decided not to go direct to consumer is because the noise in the space is already pretty loud. And the responsibility of figuring out whether we're well or unwell is already on women. And that's not just for ourselves, but it's for our entire family. And when we talked to women, what they really wanted was this extension of the physician or the provider into their life to oversee all the hard work that they were putting in, and then being able to take that into consideration. And so machine learning and AI allows us that. And I will always go back to the model that I know from high performance, which is, and Jeff from Appear Health spoke this morning, within their care and as a professional athlete, you know that you have a physician, you have a head of performance, you have an athletic trainer, someone who does strength and conditioning, physical therapist, dietitian, psychology. And so you basically just rest knowing that your prevention is taken care of, and that's a wonderful way to be. So our goal is really for every woman to have that team behind her. And while she can't run from one person to the next, if each person knows exactly what's going on with her, that's what machine learning allows us. And then one step beyond that, agentic AI, because someone touched on that yesterday, goes one step further. It actually allows us to understand, as studies are finally emerging, both in women's health and in women's high performance, to shorten the time from those studies being conducted to making them actionable. So we're not relying on one provider who read one paper to interpret that for their own practice, and then it's only his patients who are benefiting from it. And again, the same in high performance. FIFA is now conducting a study on athletes' ACL tears. Why did it take this long? And how long is it going to take for that study that I'm connected to then land broadly in the NWSL, in other soccer leagues around the world, but also it needs to trickle down. It needs to come down into colleges. We're relying on young women to both study and be active. And then now we're already conditioning high schoolers to become super specialized in their sport, because there's all this opportunity that you can unlock when you get a scholarship, when you go to college through sport. So, and at that time, they're not even menstruating. And we're still expecting to work off of male physiology that has always benefited from context. And if I may just give an example, everybody here knows Usain Bolt. He's much taller than most other sprinters. And there's this crazy statistic about the fact that Usain Bolt, in order not to fall flat on his face, had to hit 300 steps per minute coming out of the starting blocks to then, as we all know him, to sort of rise up and then overtake the field. But that's the context his team was able to build into everything for him. And that's how he unlocked multiple Olympic medals. And can we do that for women, please?
Love it. Questions from the audience? Yes, we have one right here.
Hi there. Thank you. This was such a great panel. Daisy, I know how hard it is to build what you built, especially in this market. Congratulations on your exit. It's awesome. I have questions for Bailey. So your DTC model, I totally get. Who interprets the results?
Board-certified breast radiologists.
So on-site?
Not on-site.
So like follow-up?
Yeah, within 24 hours.
Okay, awesome. And then Roma, I have a question for you also. I totally agree that we need to figure out women and exercise and health and all that. There's all this debate around cold plunging for men versus women. It's great for men, not great for women. Do you have thoughts on that?
I'll quote what most other female physiologists will say, which is it depends on where you are in your cycle. You should definitely aim, you can be at a higher temperature and still unlock, good results for yourself. But just with any other adaptation, I wouldn't force you to do it. I just think that if it's something you absolutely cannot bear, there are many other ways for you to unlock the benefits from, activating your parasympathetic nervous system, and that's part of the personalization. If you tell me I absolutely do not want a cold plunge, maybe cryo is an option for you because it's dry. It might be easier. If you like it, do it. Yeah. I wouldn't say. I would say don't go down to 40 degrees. Because there's probably a level of diminishing returns, but I love contrast therapy, and I'm in perimenopause, and it's okay.
Yes. Oh, this side.
Hi. So I think the business models for diagnostics and then of course therapeutics are obvious, but when we think about health span, I struggle with the business model for companies that aim to collect and interpret data. Mm-hmm. So health optimization, you cold plunge, you reduce the risk of chronic diseases, the big four that will kill you, cancer. And then you want to predict risk. Modifiable risk prediction is going to help us all live longer. And so you take the example of exercise physiology and you collect your data and you track. But in building these companies, the value is in the insights. You don't know what the value will be when you can collect all the data, multimodal data, but we don't know. But down the line, if I put my ex-clinician scientist's brain on, there might be only so many routes anyway. If the healthcare system, so there's consumer health and well-being, and then there's the healthcare system. So you can track all the data you want, and the machine learning models can tell you this is your risk. But if the solutions aren't there down the line, how do you get there? Serena Williams is very tracked. She still had a massive pulmonary embolism after childbirth. Now, no one can tell me that doctors make mistakes, but she has everything tracked, food, health, and so you can't predict the things that are going to kill you, and you can die from a pulmonary embolus. So how do you build a business model that is based on collecting data when we don't know the value of the insights in the future?
It goes beyond insights. So I think there was a short time frame as AI and machine learning was coming out, which was the LLM knows best, and essentially, just like ChatGPT is very confident in telling you their response, there was this flattening of the experts. And I think the real opportunity in machine learning and AI lies in augmenting the experts, keeping the humans in the loop. And then it's actually not just measuring or looking at insights, it's measuring the feedback loop of interventions. So if you look at what the physician has decided to do, what the dietitian has decided to do, figuring out the outcome that came from that and then being able to grade how that intervention worked, I think that's the future, and that's what I'm really excited about.
I'd also just like to add briefly that I think this is also one of the issues is that I think we all assume we're going to have insights, we're going to get more information, these data will bear fruit. We don't know what that is, we don't know what direction it'll be in, so it's really hard to build a business model around that. It's nearly impossible in some cases, and I think that's really an invitation to people that have the means to have there be patient capital associated with these and really put your dollars behind the people that you think can be good problem solvers and do a good job of collecting that data and then using that to create a strategy that will return whatever it is you might be looking for, whether it's money or impact. But that's essential because, I loved the talk yesterday on the science behind women's health. There's so many other things that we didn't have the time to talk about. One thing that I'll just call out as an example is when we think about female physiology, we think about the endometrium and the ovaries as two tissues that remodel constantly throughout a woman's reproductive life. Like every month, the whole tissue is remodeling, and we don't understand why or how. And just the fact that there's all of these biological mechanisms that are incredibly adaptive and dynamic and powerful, and the ways that we can then utilize some of those mechanisms to develop therapeutics for things that relate to those pieces of our biology, but also more broad, I think is just absolutely insane as one example. And it's just going to require some patience to really understand those on a deep level and then be able to translate from there. But especially in this environment when there's decimated NIH funding, we're never going to get there. And so we need dollars to move to the people that are the innovators and thinking creatively and thoughtfully with an eye towards translation, but really their focus on the basic foundation.
Yeah, agreed. Yes.
First, I just want to challenge the men in the room to at least ask one question. This is a human health issue, and I can guarantee you that this impacts someone in your life. So start getting curious. That's what we're here for.
Happy wife, happy life, men. Come on.
Something like that, yeah. And then plus one to what Daisy just said, I think the patient capital in the early stages is what we need in health innovation in general, but specifically with women's health. My question is actually for Bailey. I recently discovered on my mammogram report that I have dense breasts. So I appreciate that the FDA is now making that mandatory. But I also got a note from my doctor saying, your mammogram is normal, I'll see you next year or in 2 years. So why is it that, I think I know the answer of this, but I want your point of view, that it is so difficult for us, and as someone that I happen to know that with dense breasts, I need to go do that additional imaging, and I'm going to be seeking it out, but the system and our doctors are not paying attention in the same way. And this is my OBGYN.
Yeah. I think not all OBGYNs, right? There's a lot of OBGYNs and PCPs who are recommending and placing that order for supplemental breast ultrasound screening for their patients that have dense breast tissue. And I think the answer is in the guidelines, and it just takes time for those to update. And then also, as we're seeing, reimbursement is happening slowly, state by state, and so California, it's not reimbursed. So that could be why. I wish it would happen more quickly, but I think it is a matter of time and talking about having dense breasts, what that means, and I think a lot of people don't even know what that means, and it's perfectly normal, and more than half of women have them. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Bailey was telling me about an amazing ad that they created of showing men's testicles squeezed in a compressor. And like how lovely it was of an experience, and shouldn't everyone go do this? Which I thought was genius.
We haven't announced that yet, but I guess
sorry,
we are
it's coming.
now. No, it's
Sneak peek.
But
Okay.
Roma saw it, but it's called the manogram.
Manogram.
And, like, we love men, and
We like the manogram.
yeah, but it's just like there's a lot of problems. And still get your mammogram. Don't skip your mammogram. But
So
they do use radiation. It's not comfortable. Oftentimes women find them painful, and they can miss breast cancers and so many other qualities. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Over here.
Hey guys, so first of all, I really want to applaud Doc for emphasizing women's health this year. I think that it's wonderful to see that. And I hope that this isn't just a one-year thing, but it's a pillar going forward. In 2021, which was a banner year for VC funding, the average deal size for a women's health company was $4 million. So Daisy's an absolute hero. She stood up there with a smile still on her face. But the reality is that she sold her company prematurely to a male founder who was told by the VCs who backed him, there's a lot of great starving on the vine therapeutics companies out there, go vacuum them up. And Daisy's was one of the gems that he vacuumed up. So I'll start with that. What I will say is that we have a collective action problem. I've been in this field for over 25 years, and there's never been a more exciting time to innovate in women's health. We've never had more data, more experienced CEOs, and more interest, philanthropically, policy-wise, et cetera. But the downside of that is that we can walk away thinking the problem is being solved, and I am telling you that it is not, and that in particular female entrepreneurs in the space are not okay. They are starving at their growth round phases, and we have to get out of the cycle of founding early stage after early stage after early stage, and then handing them over to either pharma or mostly male founders, I'm sorry to say it, to vacuum them up and often separate them from people who have Daisy's spark and passion. Because we need that founder spark to stay attached to these things to really take them to the finish line. The last time we took a drug that was just developed specifically for women from scratch, from concept to market, was the birth control pill in the 1950s. That predates the VC industry by decades. So the VC industry has actually never done this from start to finish. So what I would argue is that the next huge exit that is in the distance for a VC in this room is someone who will have the bravery to give Daisy $1 billion for her next startup.
I almost want to end on that, but we can't go without a man asking a question. So, we have two. Oh, here we go. We have two men. Okay, great.
So first question would be for Daisy. So let's say you could talk to the WHO or CMS or even like the AMA team creating CPT codes. What code would you want?
Oh, that's so good. Well, okay. I don't want to get into super hyper specifics, but there's, I actually have a list of about 20 indications that aren't captured in the current ICD codes. And often what's done by clinicians is they sort of jerry-rig and like pick a different ICD code that loosely approximates what the condition is that allows to get the reimbursement. So it's kind of a mapping of like, what are the codes that are used for the conditions that we understand? And then there's the wish list of codes that just don't exist at all, partly because the conditions themselves, the diseases, the indications, don't have high enough resolution for a proper diagnosis. So it's kind of two-part. Yeah.
It would be great to have that list.
Yeah.
And the second question would be for Bailey. So one of the preventive screenings that has the lowest uptake is actually screening for breast implant leak after implantation. I'm wondering if you think that what you're doing could be an opportunity to address that low uptake preventive screening.
Yeah, 100%. So ultrasound is actually what's recommended for that instead of mammography. And yeah, that's a younger market too. So that's definitely something that we're working on. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Last one.
Thank you. This one's for the whole panel. Given some of the challenges that you described, language, established norms, what are some of the things men can do in daily life to support the great healthcare correction as friends, as fathers, husbands? What are some things you'd like to see more of?
I think asking questions and giving space to women is a really easy one in any room, whether that's at your dinner table or in places like this. I think a lot of us, a lot of female people have felt that we've not only been silenced, but a lot of times we'll say something and then 10 minutes later a man will say it and they'll get credit for the idea, which is so annoying. And so it's really understanding that we have something to say and it's actually quite powerful, and if only anybody would listen, then everyone would benefit from that. That's probably my strongest takeaway. Second to, if you have money, please put it into this field.
I'll say as a partner, my husband can tell my symptoms of low iron before I can. And he has my iron in his favorites on a very popular shopping app. But essentially, I've run into anemia or low iron, low ferritin time and time again since I was a teenager. And it takes me a good 2 days to catch on to it. I'll be wired, but I can't sleep. I'm dragging. I get irritable. And he just goes, I've got you. So if you can look, interpret, collect your own data, support, and beyond I think where we model this is in pregnancy, where, the partner gets really elevated to be the support system. There's so many other stages in our life where we need that, so.
Bailey, did you have one?
Yeah, I would just say probably investing in women's health and investing in women-founded companies that are led by women. And I know we didn't want to focus on this, but the reality is most of venture capital dollars are in the hands of men. So just listening and actually acting and investing in those companies does make a difference. So.
I just want to add one more thing that I thought of that relates to that, which is when you have the option to bring a decision maker to the table, let that person be female.
Wonderful. Unfortunately, we have to end it at there. I think they're going to boot us out of this room soon. So please give a warm round of applause for Daisy, Bailey, and Roma.
No problem. I'm talking to you guys.
Change in the future. Thank you, guys.